Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present our work entitled Bribery Across Borders, Experimental Evidence on Conditional Corruption from 21 Countries. This is joint work with researchers from the University of Amsterdam and the University of Cologne. My name is Nils Köbis, and I am at the Max Planck Institute for Human Development Center for Humans and Machines. Now, one of the main inspiration for the work that I'm about to present comes from research done by Simon Gechter and Jonathan Schultz. In their 2018 Nature paper, Intrinsic Honesty and the Prevalence of Rule Violations Across Societies, they study how individual cheating correlates with the prevalence of rule violations. And they show that in societies where prevalence of rule violations is high, for example, where there is a lot of corruption, people are more willing to cheat for financial profit. And they convincingly argue that a legacy of inefficient institutions lead to relatively stable intercultural differences in honesty. Inspired by their work, we built on it, and we are doing so in two main ways. First, we are moving from an individual cheating task to an interpersonal task on measuring unethical behavior. In our case, bribery. We are using a bribery game in which we have two roles. One is the citizen who wants to obtain a license. You could think of a driver's license, a fishing permit, etc. And the citizen can do so by either making an official payment or by making an unofficial payment to the public official who is handing out the permit. The public official, in turn, can decide whether to reject or accept the unofficial payment. As you might have already guessed, unofficial payment is a euphemism for bribery in our case. We used a neutrally framed bribery game in that sense. However, the game mimics the typical payoff structure of bribery in the sense that it is mutually beneficial for the citizen and the public official to coordinate on bribery. It at the same time leads to negative externalities, as a donation to a charity organization is cancelled if the citizen and the public official coordinate on bribing. We played this game using the strategy method. That means that all the participants in our study took both roles, the citizen and the public official. And they played this game not just within one single country, but with participants from different countries, as I will show you in just a moment. Namely, we used the only existing index that studies bribery across borders, the so-called Bribe Pairs Index. This is an index compiling expert opinions about how likely it is that you have to pay a bribe when you're interacting with people from a respective country. The index was published in 2011 by Transparency International and contains 28 countries. From these 28 countries, we sampled 21 by always recruiting a representative sample of 300 participants according to age, gender, and education, leading to a total sample of 6,472 participants. Now, what this setup allows us to do is to gain two main insights. A, we can get cultural comparative insights. Similar to the study by Simon Gechter and Jonathan Schultz, we can compare how common bribery is in these different countries. At the same time, we can get first cross-national insights, meaning we can get insights into how much who you are matched with matters for your willingness to bribe. Let me show you the bribe offers. So, replicating the findings by Gechter and Schultz, we find large heterogeneity across countries in their willingness to offer bribes, which correlates with the prevalence of rule violations. However, and maybe more importantly, we do find actually quite large differences cross-country, meaning that the people's willingness to engage in bribery seems to be largely shaped by who they are matched with. Here in this graph, you see countries with a relatively low likelihood of bribery according to the Bribe Pairs Index in green, and those with high likelihood of bribery in darker yellow and red colors. And you see for each country, people's willingness to offer bribes is strongly influenced by who they are matched with. In general, confirming our pre-registered prediction that it correlates with the Bribe Pairs Index. Now, let me show you one more finding that I think is particularly relevant for this audience. We are also assessing in this study empirical expectations. So we ask participants in an incentivized way to guess how likely it is that their bribe offers are accepted. And the unique thing about our study is that we can actually compare that to the actual acceptance rate. So the first finding here is something that we pre-registered, namely that we expected that these expectations would be shared within a certain country, meaning that participants from a respective country would somehow have converging beliefs about who they are matched with. Now, what's more is that we actually do find large divergence between these empirical expectations and the actual acceptance rate. So I'm here plotting some countries for which people largely underestimated how likely it is that they are going to accept the bribes. So let's take, for example, the US. Here we find that people expect around 43% of participants to accept bribes. However, the actual acceptance rate in the US was above 55%. On the flip side, we also find quite often overestimation of bribe acceptance. For example, in this case, in Argentina, people expected that around 47% of participants would accept bribes. However, the actual acceptance rate was around 37%. Let me briefly summarize the main findings of our study. First, we replicate Simon Gechter's research by again showing intercultural variation in unethical behavior, in our case, bribe offers and acceptance. But what we add to this literature is that we actually find cross-country variation. And in fact, for the findings in our study, it matters more who you are matched with than where you're from, something that we call conditional corruption. Finally, as I've showed you last, the empirical expectations are shared across and within countries, but they deviate from actual acceptance rates, something that we call corruption stereotypes. On that note, I would like to thank you. And if you have any questions or feedback, I'm really looking forward to hear them.